Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today I'm returning to Civil War Generals 2. This is part 2 of my Battle of Bull Run. In our first video, we looked at the Battle of Blackburn Ford, and then in part 1 of Bull Run, we fought through the first day of the battle, which occurred on July 19th, 1861. You may be saying, wait a minute, that's not when the Battle of Bull Run was fought, and you would be completely correct. The actual historical Battle of Bull Run occurred on July 21st. This is a variant of Bull Run, so this is not an exact recreation of the battle, and that is due in large part to the fact that in the Battle of Blackburn Ford, unlike in real life, we won a decisive victory against the Confederate forces, so we drove across the Bull Run creek or river or whatever you want to call it. So we were no longer pinned behind the creek, behind those bridges, and as a result, I assume the Union Army moved quicker than historically was the case. Now, in the first part of the Bull Run video, so real quick, this is the third video that was made from a live stream that I did back on something like the 14th of August. And I mentioned the first video was Blackburn Ford, which is kind of a skirmish that occurred prior to the Battle of Bull Run. The second video was the first day of the Battle of Bull Run, and the third video is this one. So in the first part of Bull Run, we fought through the battle on July 19th, which again was an early start to Bull Run. We advanced on the sort of right flank or on the eastern flank of the Confederate Army with about half of our army, and we began advancing across the creek on the northwest, on the left side of the map with the other half of our army. Now the left maneuver on the left northwest portion of the battlefield, that closely resembled the historic Union offensive against the Confederacy. The right maneuver was not something that occurred in the way that it occurred in this battle. But I'm no longer really, you can hear, I'm no longer using the audio from the stream at this point. So I know in the last video it was really just kind of a, here's the live stream and, let's listen to what happened. In this particular video, I've actually cut the audio out because I thought it would be useful to discuss the actual history of the real Battle of Bull Run. So obviously, as you see here on the map, we're going to be fighting the battle out, but I thought it might be useful to provide some historical context to the actual Battle of Bull Run and discuss that, because after all, I am the historical gamer, and I didn't do that a lot in the live stream. Toward the end of this live stream, I start getting a little bit quiet for my own taste, so I thought, again, it would be useful to talk about what really happened and the history behind it, and then we can loop back and talk about what's going on in the battlefield here. Presently, you can see we kind of held our ground toward the end of the first day. We built somewhat of a static line here on the eastern flank, and then on the western flank, we're pushing the Confederates in a somewhat disorganized and haphazard manner, and we're going to continue trying to push them and both flanks, hopefully more effectively, but at the moment the battle is undecided. But with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into the history of the actual Battle of Bull Run. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on here and what happened in reality. First, let's take a look back. In order to really understand the Battle of Bull Run, and remember, it's Bull Run in the south and Manassas in the north, but in order to really understand the Battle of Bull Run, what you really need to understand is what forced the battle to occur. Why did this fight occur? And if we look back, really it comes down to the firing on Fort Sumter, obviously. Firing on Fort Sumter occurred April 12th to April 14th, 1861. Confederate forces in the harbor of Charleston fire on the Union fort in the harbor and force it to surrender. The day after that, and that's really the first shot, the shot heard throughout all of North America that really inaugurated the Civil War. The day after that, April 15th, 1861, Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, calls for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion in the South. Now, there's some political ramifications to this where, in doing so, it helped justify or push some of the border states into the arms of the Confederacy. It definitely caused, Virginia to switch over to the Confederacy, although, again, if all it took was calling up volunteers to put down a rebellion that was in the process of ongoing, they were already going anyway. But the point is, Lincoln calls up 75,000 volunteers to help put down the rebellion in the South. Now, the terms behind those 75,000 volunteers was a 3-month enlistment. Later, Lincoln would also recruit another 40,000 additional volunteers that exceeded his request and would sign them to 3-year contracts. But the real driving force behind Bull Run was 75,000 troops called up for 90 days. So the troops are called up and they sign 90-day enlistments. So they get called up. They start mustering throughout the country, and they start slowly making their way east toward Washington. And not all 75,000 troops went to Washington. There's troops spattered, throughout the West, Mississippi, St. Louis, north of Kentucky and Ohio. The troops scattered all throughout. But a large percentage of these troops end up making their way toward Washington. And there they begin to be organized. Irvin McDowell, a commander with very little experience, but good relations with political figures in Washington, is promoted to brigadier general in the regular army, and he is given command of the Union Army in the East. It's going to be called the Army of Northeastern Virginia. And he starts organizing the army. He organizes it into 5 different divisions and begins drilling and training the troops. But as you can imagine, it's the 1860s. Transportation, they have rail, but it's not instant, it's not rapid. It takes time to organize men into units, it takes time for those troops to respond to the call, it takes time to equip and arm troops. So it takes time. And Lincoln only called them up for 90 days. 3 months. You've got 3 months to win the Civil War. In a time, in today's world, that might seem more reasonable. Certainly isn't, but it might seem a little bit more reasonable. In 1861, with the technology available, the communication available, the transportation available, 3 months was a bad call. 90-day enlistments. So April comes and goes. Not much is happening. May comes and goes. Again, still not much happening. June comes and goes. Very little happening in the East. But at this point, you got to start being worried as Lincoln. You've got these men for 90 days. Their enlistments are going to run out in the middle of July. You could extend their enlistments, which inevitably ends up happening. But from a political standpoint, you've called these people up for 3 months, and your 3 months are basically up, and what do you have to show for it? Nothing. There's been no major battles fought. There was a minor engagement in Big Bethel along the Virginia Peninsula, where the Union Army had a Fortress Monroe, and had a minor engagement with some Confederates there, but no real push on Richmond from there. And the Confederates, by this point, have established their capital in Richmond, Virginia, just 90 miles from Washington, D.C. And another key factor which often gets overlooked in the Battle of Bull Run is General George B. McClellan. Now, McClellan is known to most people these days as being an overly cautious commander who never attacked and failed to live up to his reputation and the hype around him. And that's all fair. But we need to remember how McClellan started the war. He was an absolute hero. And why? Because while the Union armies in the East were doing nothing, and there were no real major engagements in the West, McClellan won a string of somewhat stunning victories to the Union. In the grand scheme of things, when we look back on the Civil War, it's easy to understand why we never talk about it. Because they were minuscule victories. We're talking 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, or 200 men killed, wounded, or missing. We're talking 5,000, 6,000 men engaged, sometimes less. These are skirmishes by Civil War standards. Just, the Battle of Bull Run. Over 5,000 casualties on both sides. Not a single one of McClellan's engagements in the early days of the war exceeded, I think 600 casualties was the most, and most of those were captured. I think less than 100 on either side were ever killed or wounded. So these are minuscule engagements, but not to the North, not at the time. Most people didn't have a clue what was coming. So what are these victories? What did he do? Well, General George B. McClellan, in 1861, was given command of the forces invading or securing the western sections of the state of Virginia. Now remember, the state of Virginia seceded from the Union, but Western Virginia was very sympathetic to the Union. It wasn't really driven by slaveholders. It was more of a coal mining area, very culturally distinct from the rest of Virginia. And despite that, the entire state of Virginia, when the war broke out, had left. And the Union wanted to secure the western portions of the state. So General George B. McClellan's job was to secure what we think of today as Western Virginia, or a large portion of it. So in early June of 1861, George B. McClellan sent 3,000 men under Brigadier General Thomas A. Morris to invade portions of Western Virginia in the Barbour County area. The Confederates met his 3,000 men with 800, and Morris divided his command in two and launched a double envelopment of the Confederate forces, attacked them in the early morning, surprised them, and routed them from the field. And to give you a scale of what was going on here, there were about 4 casualties in the actual battle on the Union side, and 26 on the Confederate side. So we're talking a minuscule engagement, a very minor engagement, although it did have ramifications. So the battle took place on the 3rd of June, 1861, so early June 1861. It was the first organized conflict between Union and Confederate forces, and General McClellan, who was in overall command, although Thomas Morris was in command of the two elements on the field, McClellan was in overall command. And given it was the first engagement of the war, given that it was a decisive Union victory, and would have severe ramifications for the portion of Western Virginia which would break away and rejoin the Union as its own state, the state of West Virginia. The Union press hailed this as a dramatic victory. It propelled General McClellan into the spotlight. It made him look as if he was a Napoleonic figure. After all, his subordinate divided his army in two, marched one portion of it around the enemy, and attacked from two sides, launching a double envelopment. In Shelby Foote's History of the American Civil War, which I've put in the description here because it's one of my favorite works, despite admittedly being somewhat flawed, but Shelby Foote's work puts it as a Napoleonic-type victory. It was viewed as a Napoleonic victory, this daring offensive launched by a commander who split his force in two, launched a double envelopment, routed the enemy from the field decisively and with limited loss on his side. It propelled McClellan into the spotlight as a hero, and it had severe ramifications, as I've already said, for the portion of Western Virginia. It also had ramifications in the East. So this victory made McClellan look aggressive, and as we'll find as the war goes on, that's certainly not an accurate characterization of him, but that doesn't matter, because at the time, it made McClellan look aggressive, successful, and it made McDowell look weak and indecisive. It made McDowell look as someone unwilling to take risks and unwilling to launch an offensive. And that had a significant impact on pressuring Lincoln through Congress and pressuring McDowell through Lincoln to launch an offensive before he believed he was ready. So remember, these recruits were called up on April 15th, 1865, and while many of them didn't enlist right on the 15th, most of their enlistments were starting to come up by July of 1861. In early June, there's this dramatic victory in Western Virginia, and then nothing. Nothing happens. No major movement by Union forces. There was another battle that was fought by McClellan in Western Virginia that occurred in July 11th of 1861, and it was another victory for the Union, 7,000 men versus 1,300 Confederates, even more decisive, more than 1/5 of the Confederate army destroyed, versus only 46 casualties out of 7,000 for the Union. But that didn't occur till July 11th, well after the impact of the Battle of Philippi, if I'm pronouncing that right, which was the first fight in June of 1861 in Western Virginia, had already been felt. So again, McDowell sitting in front of Washington with his army, growing and training, but does nothing in the month of May, nothing in the month of June. And now July comes around, and McClellan's won this great victory in the West, and the press and the media is starting to clamor, "What the heck are you doing? On to Richmond. Let's end this rebellion once and for all." The thought was, if we take the Confederate capital, the war will be over, the South will give up, and, we'll all be done by Christmas. General Winfield Scott Hancock, who was the overall commander of Union forces, did not want McDowell to launch an offensive against the Confederates in the Virginia area. He wanted to wait. He had his infamous Anaconda Plan, which is more or less what the Union ended up adopting later in the war, but he was mocked for it. The idea of starving the Confederacy via blockade, cutting them off by moving a force down the Mississippi. It would take too long. We don't want to do that. It's just going to take too damn long. We want to end the war now. Let's end it decisively. Let's march out onto the field of battle. Let's meet the Confederates in one decisive battle, and let's win the war. That was the thought process. And McDowell had the largest army ever raised in the history of the United States, I believe, at least in North America, 35,000 men. And at the time, anyway, obviously future armies would be larger. And people are clamoring, do something. So McDowell comes up with a plan. He says, General Patterson, with 18,000 men in the Shenandoah Valley, will fix General Joseph E. Johnston, who has about 8 to 12,000 men in the valley. He'll fix him in place, keep him busy, keep him occupied, advance on him, do whatever he needs to do to keep him in place. And then General McDowell will advance south with the bulk of his force, some 35,000 men, on Manassas Junction, and attack General P.G.T. Beauregard there. The hero of Sumter from the Southern perspective, the individual who commanded the attack on Fort Sumter, already a Southern military hero, commands about 20,000 men near Manassas. So he'll fix him there, he'll march south, he'll defeat him, and then once Beauregard's defeated, either he can march directly on Richmond or he could turn on Johnson, isolate him, destroy him in the valley, and then with both major Confederate field armies in Virginia destroyed, you'd waltz into Richmond unopposed. Simple, right? Well, interestingly, General Beauregard had a similar opinion of what he was going to do to the Union Army. Beauregard approached Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, and said, what we need to do is we need to rail Joseph E. Johnston to the east, have him meet up with my army. We'll advance on General McDowell. We'll defeat him in front of Alexandria. Then we'll swing west and defeat General Patterson in the valley, and we'll be able to waltz into Washington. Decisive in nature, always aggressive in his plans, to the point of being unrealistic, Beauregard was told to wait. Was told, nope, too big of a risk. We're not going to do that. Even from a PR game, we don't want to advance on the Union. We don't want to be the aggressors. The enemy will come to us. We will fight on our home territory. That will give us the moral high ground, and it will also give us a better fighting spirit within our ranks. So Beauregard waits. Meanwhile, Irvin McDowell puts forth the plan I mentioned to you earlier. General Scott opposes it. Winfield Scott. Did I say Winfield Scott Hancock earlier? I meant Winfield Scott. W.S. Hancock was Corps commander, but Winfield Scott was the elderly Army commander of the whole Army. He opposed the plan, but Lincoln said, you know what? Fine, let's do it. We've been waiting for too long. Pressure's too great. We need to do something. Let's get aggressive. McClellan's out here in the West. It's ironic as heck. McClellan's out here in West Virginia, and he's aggressive and decisive and winning big victories, or a big victory, and we're doing nothing here. So originally the plan was July 8th, McDowell's going to move out. But the Union Army wasn't ready. Not enough supply, not enough transport, concentration of force not in place. So that gets delayed. Gets delayed to around July 16th. The Army starts to move. But the Army, as Lincoln put it, you're green, but, they're green just like you. I'm paraphrasing. The Army was green. It was not disciplined. It was not ready for a fight. But they're told, march anyway. And it takes them 3 days to march something like 20 or 30 miles. I told you Richmond is 90 miles south, but again, the Manassas is, I want to say, about 30 miles from Alexandria. I'm not looking at a map. I'm doing this off memory, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But they march out. But it's not an army. It's a mob. You've got congressmen following you along. It's a party. It's let's go watch us win the Civil War. Congressmen going out with their family, wealthy individuals going out in horse and buggies. They want to watch this glorious event. They don't want to take part, but they want to watch it. Spectators, the greatest entertainment ever. War. Let's go watch. So the army has to deal with that. But then the army also has to deal with the fact that these troops are not trained, they're not disciplined, they're not ready for war. So soldiers marching along the road. Hey, look, there's berries. I'm hungry. Are you hungry? Yeah, everyone's hungry. Let's break ranks. Let's stop marching. Let's go grab some berries. Well, the regiment behind him is like, well, what the fuck? You guys are all in our way, pardon my language. Well, I guess we're going to sit here and wait until we can move out. And then they start marching again. And then, something else distracts them. And they all break ranks and, let's go, take a break. Let's eat some food. It takes them 3 days to march those 20 to 30 miles. 3 days. So, it's taking their time. Marching south slowly. Taking them 3 days. Well, those 3 days are put to good use by the Confederates. PG-2 Boulder Guards scouts detect Union armies moving. They're headed toward us. 35,000 men. I'm heavily outnumbered. Got about a little bit more than 20,000 men. So he sends a notice to President Jefferson Davis. The Union Army is advancing in force. Please send reinforcements. Take Joseph E. Johnston's army in the valley. Put them on trains. Reinforce me. Give General Patterson in the valley to the west the slip. Send me reinforcements. And General Patterson in the valley is just twiddling his thumbs or something. General McDowell ordered him to fix Johnston in his place, but he's not advancing. He's not doing anything to keep, Johnston in place. So Johnston's able to start doing that. He's able to start throwing troops on trains and moving them east. But Beauregard falls in despair. By the time he's told that Johnston's forces are moving, he believes it's too late. We're going to have to face the enemy with what we have. Outnumbered 2 to 3. Pretty heavily outnumbered. Long odds. Difficult for any army to overcome those kind of odds. Especially when both forces are green. Maybe if one was a veteran and had really strong defensive positions, but not when one army is green and the other army is green and no one knows what the hell they're doing. It's too late. I'm going to have to face these guys on our own. And sort of starts to work out that way. July 18th comes, and the Union Army engages the Confederates at the Battle of Blackburn Ford. And we've already talked about that, but suffice to say, General Tyler's division, a brigade there, 3,000 men, advance against the Confederates. General Longstreet's force, some 5,000 men, scouting out the Confederate positions along Bull Run. And the Confederates hold their ground, push the Union back. And the Union decides, all right, well, we can't try a frontal assault. They had been advancing to Centerville in Virginia, and they were going to advance directly south across the Blackburn's Ford and see if they could cross the Bull Run Creek. And I don't have a map in front of you, so you're going to have to kind of imagine the map in the game that we've kind of shown, and just, if you're interested, look it up. But a frontal assault's not going to work. So McDowell decides, I'm going to launch a flanking assault. I'm going to fix the enemy. Again, this fixation with pinning the enemy in place so they can't move reinforcements to their flank. But I'm going to fix the enemy on these fords, and there's a stone bridge here. We're going to advance Tyler's division kind of on our right against the stone bridge, and then we're going to advance half of our army way to the right of the Union Army, the left of the Confederates, all the way around Bull Run, all the way north of the Confederate positions, cross the creek, and then advance down the Confederate flank. Advance down on the Confederate left flank. It'll be the Union right, the Confederate left. Roll up their lines, and as they roll them up down the river, they'll uncover Stone Bridge and other fords across the river. The two remaining Union divisions across from Bull Run, which are there to fix the Confederates in place, as the Union sweeps south and east, they'll free up those fords and allow those other Union forces to join in, which will allow reinforcements to begin coming in from the rest of the army, and they'll sweep the Confederates from the field. Well, interestingly enough, General Beauregard had a similar opinion. As I said, nothing's happening. He sends the report on July 16th or 17th saying, the Union Army's on the move, I need reinforcements, so crap, they're not going to get here in time. Wait a minute, they didn't attack, and they skirmished on the 18th, but they didn't attack on the 19th. They didn't attack on the 20th. What the hell's going on? Okay, wait a minute. General Johnston's forces have started to arrive. The Union's given us plenty of time, and now about 4,500 men of Johnston's force have arrived. So Beauregard is stronger than he was before, and he says, I'm not going to stay in place. I'm not just going to sit here and wait for the enemy to come to me. I'm going to launch an attack on the enemy. So what does he think? Well, listen, we've got these strong positions along the Bull Run Creek. Union armies to our front at Centerville. We're going to advance on our right across the creek. We're going to force the crossing. And then we're going to turn the Union right flank, or the Union left flank, our right flank. We're going to advance on our right flank, and we're going to turn the Union out of Centerville, drive them to the west, drive them from the field, and destroy them. The identical strategy that General Irvin McDowell decided on. The Union launches a flanking attack on their right. The Confederates are going to launch a flanking attack on their right. And if they had occurred simultaneously, as Foote put it, the two armies may have grappled with each other, swinging around in circles, neither able to land a decisive blow. But as was the case, Beauregard's orders were, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing his name, guys, so I'm sorry about that, but Beauregard's orders were not clear. His troops thought, okay, these are our orders, we're going to attack on the right, we just need to wait for the order to go. Beauregard intended for them to move at first light, and he would issue further orders after the attack began. So he's sitting there in the morning, and nothing's happening. Nothing. He thinks, well, maybe they're advancing across the river, and they just haven't met any resistance yet. I don't know. I'm not going to send any couriers to them. No, I'm just going to wait and see. And he starts to hear firing on his left. Stone Bridge is being attacked by Tyler's division as part of a feint. Some of the other fords are being attacked by other forces in the Union Army as part of a feint. But still nothing on his far right. He realizes the Union may be forming up a large attack on his left. He gets scouting reports of masses of enemy formations to his left, but that may still work. That may still work with his plan. That may still work with the scenario, the situation going on. If the Union attacks his left and he swings in and attacks on the right with force, he could cut the whole army off. Maybe it'll work. And then he receives orders or a report from General Ewell, I believe it was. It might have been Early, but I think it was Ewell. That states, listen, I'm done waiting for your attack orders. I guess I'm going to go forward now and attack anyway, since we haven't heard anything from you. And he realizes, crap, no one's attacking yet. Well, at this point, it's going to take them so long to get into action moving into the right flank. There's no point. All I'm going to do is send my right flank out, into who knows where, and then if I do need them on my left, where this Union attack seems to be materializing, it's too late. If they had already been attacking, then they could provide assistance by threatening the Union flank. But if they're going to take an hour or two getting into position while we're being attacked on our left, we could be, shorting ourselves some valuable reserves. So countermands those orders. Early, Ewell, get the hell back here. Longstreet, get back here. We're not going to attack on the right. Let's reinforce our left. And the Union attack comes up the left. And it's a fierce attack. It's well put together. It's a complex plan for a Green Army to commence an attack across a river with two divisions trying to flank the enemy and attack at right angles. It's not easy. But they keep on moving forward. They keep on attacking. They drive the initial Confederates back. General B's brigade and a host of other Confederate forces. General Wade Hampton, a force of some 600 men. Confederates being pushed back. They're breaking under pressure. And the moment of crisis arrives. The generals are up on the hill watching what's going on, and they see, and this is General Johnston and General Beauregard at this point, and they see B's brigade coming apart. I believe Evans was another brigade commander coming apart. And they see General Hampton being forced back, and this tide of 16,000 Union troops sweeping up the Confederate left flank. And there's one brigade on the reverse slope of Henry Hill, standing and waiting, fixed to their guns in defensive formation, waiting in good order, like veterans, it appeared to everyone. Who might that be, you guess? Well, at that point, B, with his brigade coming to seams, falling apart, turns and looks, sees General Jackson and his brigade waiting back there. The other brigades, as the Confederates formed up on the left in an attempt to stop the Union offensive, rush into battle. Wade Hampton moves his forces forward to join the line. B moves his forces to join the line. As these Confederate brigades came onto the field, they all raced forward into the melee, into the maelstrom, but not in great tactical position. It was just, the fight is there, let's get there. Jackson holds back, stays on the reverse slope of this hill. And B sees him standing there. And B turns to his men in an attempt to rally his men. And he says, "Look there, men. There stands Jackson, standing like a stone wall. Let us be determined to die here, and we will conquer," or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. And some historians have argued B was being derogatory toward Jackson. He was saying, good God, Jackson's standing there like a stone wall. He won't bring his brigade up to help us. We're going to have to reform ourselves if we want to conquer and do anything, because Jackson's just going to sit back there like an idiot. And others say that he was shouting in inspiration. He was saying, look at that. His men are standing there in good order with courage as the enemy continues to advance toward their position. They've driven us back, but Jackson is standing there ready to fight. Let's go join him. Depends on your interpretation. There's various interpretations of this. We'll never know what he really meant, because B was killed a few minutes later. But as Jackson's sitting there on the reverse slope of the hill, the Union advance crests, starts advancing up the hill. And by this point, Henry Hill's far enough back. General Tyler was one of 2 divisions partook. I said half the Union Army partook in this flanking maneuver. The other half did not. So there were 4 divisions in this fight. I know the Army was made up of 5, but there were 4 here on the field. 2 divisions launching the flank attack, 1 division under Tyler, which is behind the Stone Bridge, kind of in the center of the line, 1 division further south and east toward Blackburn Ford. And as the Union advance and drive B back and Evans back, they've driven the Confederates back in front of Stone Bridge as well. So a 3rd Union division comes up. So now we're to 3/4 of the Union Army is able to be engaged and pushing the Confederates back. And the Union start advancing up Henry Hill. And a wall of musketry erupts from Jackson's front and drives the Union back. Well-organized musketry, 6 howitzer cannons firing into the Union lines. These green troops weren't ready for that. They didn't come prepared to fight that. That wasn't in their plan to do anything with. And so the moment of crisis comes. Jackson's men hold their line, save the day in the eyes of many, and drive the Union back. And the Union officers in the rear rally their men and say, come on, men, let's not let one brigade hold us back. But by this point, the moment of crisis is past. More Confederate troops are coming up and forming on Jackson, and the Confederate line grows thicker and thicker with reinforcements. And the Union launch another attack, but it fails to push the Confederates back. And in the eyes of Union troops, they see Confederate forces growing in numbers, Confederate lines getting stronger and stronger. More and more reinforcements from Johnston's army are coming up. Jackson on the hill, but not just Jackson now, remnants of B's, Evans, Hampton's brigades, as well as, I believe, Early and Ewell come up as well. And so the Confederates are forming this strong line, this line ready to receive further Union attacks. You've got Kirby Smith, who's wounded early, who's ready there. You've got Koch's brigade. You've got Early's brigade. Stewart's cavalry accidentally charges Union troops that they thought were Confederates until it was too late, and then their only way of escape is charge. And so this line gets thicker and thicker and stronger, and the Union become dismayed. They say, damn, the Confederates are getting all these reinforcements. Where the hell are our reinforcements? Where are our men? What's going on here? Why are our officers not giving us any support? What's going on? And so morale begins to drop. According to Shelby Foote, the historian, some Union soldiers begin feeling they're betrayed. They even begin shouting it, "We're betrayed, men, we're betrayed!" And they begin retreating. They begin withdrawing. And it's not a rout yet. The attack is beaten back, but McDowell has formed up some reserves, and he's ready to meet any potential Confederate attack. But as the withdrawal continues, as troops begin to pull back further and further and further, and more and more troops pull back and disregard their officers' pleas to, come on, men, let's rally. As people begin to disregard that, it slowly turns into a rout. You've got Confederates that begin attacking vigorously. Jackson and his men move forward on the Union force with vigor. He tells the men to shout like furies, or whatever. And the first rebel yell rises up from the crowd. Terrifying many Union troops. And the Confederate line advances in unison, and the Union crumple before it. And all these senators, these not noblemen, but these aristocratic businessmen, high and tidy, decided we're going to go and we're going to watch on these hillsides, and we're going to see the end of the war as the Union Army sweeps the Confederates from the field, are caught up in what quickly turns into a rout. Union troops running in panic, officers attempting to rally them. McDowell forms a reserve line of a couple of brigades that hadn't been engaged, only to be swept up in the chaos and confusion of a retreat. I believe at least one congressman was captured by the Confederates, and, the roads are clogged. Just a horrible and terrifying experience. The Union is beaten. The Union is driven back. And, that was the Battle of Bull Run. That's what happened. The Union is beaten, but the Confederacy is very disorganized as well. It's easy to think, why didn't the Confederacy advance on Washington? In fact, Jackson had told Jefferson Davis, I think he said something like, give me 10,000 men and I'll take Washington. And Davis believed him. But when Davis reached Beauregard and Johnston, they both said, no, an advance isn't possible. Our men are disorganized, they're strung out, they're exhausted, they haven't been fed. We don't have any organized force that's capable of moving forward and taking Washington. The Union Army retreated, and at least seemingly there was little standing before the Confederates in Washington. That may not have really been the case. If the Confederates had begun advancing, it's 30 or 40 miles away, a couple days heads up. Certainly there could have been something that would have been rallied and put in his way. But nonetheless, the Confederates are disorganized. They're in an afterglow of success, an afterglow of victory. They think they've just won the war. They think the war is over. They've beaten the Union, and they're, going to be successful. The Confederacy is realized. McDowell is disgraced. His army was driven from the field in a rout. And as we've mentioned before, General Joseph B. McClellan is meeting with great success in Western Virginia. The Battle of Rich Mountain occurred just 10 days before the Battle of Bull Run. Again, more pressure on the Union to advance. This battle saw 7,000 men under George B. McClellan and future commander of Western armies, William S. Rosecrans. 7,000 men advance against 1,300 forces, 1,300 men in Randolph County, Virginia. And the battle was, again, it took place 10 days before the Battle of Bull Run, but it was a huge Union victory. Almost 1/4 of all Confederate forces are killed, wounded, and captured. Less than 1/20th of the Union Army suffers similarly. Well, it's less than 1/50th, actually. Only 46 men out of 7,000. 300 Confederates out of 1,300. And then one final big victory. 20,000 men under McClellan, Rosecrans, and Morris would win a victory just 2 days later at the Battle of Cork's Ford. 20,000 Union versus 4,500 Confederates. Some 53 Union casualties, up to anyway. And 20 killed or wounded on the Confederate side, but over 600 missing, 600 deserters, captured, what have you. So back-to-back victories, decisive victories. 4,500 Confederates lose over 620 men. 1,300 Confederates lose over 300 men. All with the grand total of less than 100 casualties to the Union armies under McClellan. These battles occurring just days before Bull Run seal the fate of McDowell, who is now humiliated and defeated, whereas McClellan is the hero of 3 victories, the liberator of Western Virginia, and the only Union commander with significant success at this time of the war. As a result, not long after the Battle of Bull Run, General George B. McClellan would be given command of the Union armies in the East. Actually, I believe all the Union armies at one point, but at least early on, the Union armies in the East. And he would start reorganizing and fixing the Union Army of the Potomac. That's probably a discussion for another day, but for all of McClellan's shortcomings as a commander, his unwillingness to commit troops to decisive action which may result in significant casualties, he was one hell of an organizer. And over the next year, he would build the army that would defeat the Confederacy when General Grant took over. But that's a story for another day. So that in of itself, that in a nutshell, many have written books on Bull Run. It's something you can certainly write volumes and volumes of. But that, in a nutshell, was the Battle of Bull Run. And our own battle that you've watched play out as I've jibber-jabbered on and on about the battle took a similar turn. Not in exactly the same character. I mean, the first day's battle was more or less a draw. We pushed the Confederates back, but lost pretty heavily. Second day's battle started out all right. We captured some Confederates. We drove them back a little bit, and then Confederate reinforcements, I assume from Johnston's army, showed up and drove us from the field. And now on the night of the second day, July 20th, our army, mostly routed, largely routed, is beginning to reform. It's beginning to find itself and regather morale and what have you. But it's too late. We could defend some distant post from the Confederates, but that would just waste time. And so in the stream, I made the decision, it's time to pull out. Let's get all of the army out. Let's do what we can to save the army. Let's pull them back. So the troops that rout from the field, well, they run away. They're gone. There's nothing we can do about them. But the ones that are reforming and rallying, I'm pulling off the field anyway. And in this game, you can pull troops off the field by just, moving them all the way to the edge of the map, where there's kind of a little wagon symbol that represents a supply depot or the edge of the map. And then if you move troops there, then you can cause them to withdraw. And you lose victory points for doing so, but you can pull them off the map that way. And so you can see some troops are running off the map on their own, and some troops are running off the map because I tell them to run off the map. But long story short, we were decisively defeated in the Battle of Bull Run, as was history the case. The army was not destroyed, again, as was the case in history. And it was a 2-day fight, unlike the actual battle, which was a 1-day fight. We fought a little bit early because of the success of Blackburn's Ford, which was ahistorical. But at the end of the day, the end result was the same. We were defeated, and defeated in detail. Now, in this video is coming to an end here in a minute or two, but in this video's description, I am going to throw a link to Shelby Foote's narrative history of the battle, or narrative history of the Civil War, Part 1, which details the early years of the war up to, I think, Fredericksburg. I'm also going to throw a link to a book that details specifically with the Battle of Manassas, if that's something you're interested in. I haven't reviewed the book, but it's okay. They are affiliate links, so be aware of that. I'm not telling you need to click on it. I'm not asking anyone to click on these or buy anything. I'm just putting them there for your knowledge. If you want to learn more, if you want to get more detail there and it's something you're interested, you click on the link, you buy it, I get a little bit of a cut, and I appreciate any support that you guys do. Subsequently, apparently, I didn't know it works this way, but if you click on the link and you don't buy it, but you then go somewhere else on Amazon and you buy something else on Amazon, then I also get a cut of that. So if you want to do that, I'm more than welcome to, but that's enough of me shilling for money. Again, I'm just throwing these links in because I think they're relevant to the discussion at hand, and if it's something you're interested, check it out. I might as well get a little bit of a cut. Not everything should go to the man, right? But if not, I won't pester you anymore about it. As you can see here, pulling the rest of the army off the map, that'll take a few more turns, but long story short, this battle is over and we are defeated. This was the end of the first live stream piece that I did for Civil War Generals 2. The next battle that takes place after this will be the Battle of Shiloh. I may do something similar where kind of I break it into 2 parts, one for each day, because the Battle of Shiloh was 2 parts, and I may, talk about the history in one of those parts and then just play the live stream clip from the other part. Not quite sure how that'll break out. I'm not also sure how I'm going to break out the timing of all of these episodes. Originally I thought, hey, I'll do one a day, but I just haven't been able to commit to that yet. So we'll see. I also want to keep it something where I don't become the Civil War General channel either, so I may break it up and put other things in there also. As you can see here, though, the Union suffered a major defeat, 2,500 Confederate killed, 5,200 wounded, 4,300 deserted, 2,600 surrendered. So the Confederate casualties amount to about 6,900 captured or surrendered, in addition to another 7,700 killed or wounded. Between the two, the Confederates lost a little bit shy of 15,000 men, while the Union forces lost about 20,000 men. Casualties not quite as decisively different as I had thought they'd be. My real quick math here may be off a bit. Seems a little bit low. So maybe 14,000 to 20,000. But 20,000 men was about 2/3 of the Union Army, so that's obviously decisive, whereas the Confederates lost about 1/3 of their army, much less decisive. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. The following clips that you'll show kind of delve into the situation of the different officers. You can see that William Tecumseh Sherman's fully recovered and he's back. Heintzelman, one of the division commanders, and Palmer both died in combat. Talks about the replacements on screen here. And the next little bit is just me going through and upgrading different units to new weapons, which I showed you at the end of Blackburn Ford, so I don't need to show you that again. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts in the description or in the chat. If this is something you're enjoying, a series you're enjoying, please let me know. I'd be happy to continue it. I do have some more in the pipe. I fought through the Battle of Shiloh as well as the start of the 7 days. So I certainly have footage. It's a matter of whether anyone is interested in watching it. But that'll be enough of my rambling. I really haven't been saying much of any content for the last 10 minutes. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and let me know your thoughts. Until next time, it's the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.